So, welcome to the science and art of open water swimming. In this episode, I'm joined by Duncan Kinnear, an endurance athlete whose experiences span the Rottnest Channel Swim, Ironman racing, and more recently, the extreme conditions of Celtman in Scotland. What's fascinating about Duncan's journey is not just the progression to longer and tougher events, but the way those events fundamentally change the demands of the swim, whether it's cold water, limited visibility, or the need to adapt pacing and perception under stress. We'll explore how different open water conditions shape performance, how to think about wetsuits and temperature, and what it actually takes to move from simply completing an event to racing them well. There's also a really interesting discussion about balancing training with work and family life and how perspectives on endurance sport can evolve over time. I think you really enjoy this one. There's a lot here for swimmers, triathletes, and anyone curious about pushing their limits in open water. Duncan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Grant, thanks for having me on.
I'd really like to get a bit of a background from your open water swimming experiences, how you got involved with that and triathlon, and most recently have become a parent.
Yeah, so I've swum most of my life, but never really to that high level of competition. It was more just a thing that I did from a young age, a couple of times a week. And I always enjoyed it. I always loved swimming, but I was never that interested in the competition. And so when you hear people training at 4 a.m. 5 times a week at the age of 12, that definitely wasn't me. And partly because my parents didn't push me, but also I just wasn't really interested in it. But when I went to uni, I continued swimming. I joined the swimming club at uni and really enjoyed that. Mostly the social aspect of it, but it was a good way to keep fit as well. Yeah, I don't really know how I got into longer endurance events. Like I just sort of fancied it as a challenge. As you get older, you start looking for new ways to occupy yourself, and doing longer swims and longer runs was something that interested me and kept me focused. um, and yeah, as I said, I probably don't have a lot of competitive spirit in me. I was never really that interested in team sports either. Like I enjoyed playing them, but I wasn't that bothered about winning, and that probably didn't make me great at those sports. But when it comes to endurance sport, I really love the personal challenge of it. It's just you against the clock and the elements. So yeah, when I moved back to Perth in 2018, I heard about the Rottnest Swim, and I just really thought it was a good challenge. And yeah, I just went straight into it, aiming for that. So I'd done one 10K swim in Scotland before I moved back here, and that sort of gave me the bug to do longer events. So yeah, that's a quick bit of background.
So I'm interested, what drew you to Perth to come from Scotland? You spent a little bit of time here, then went home again and then came back. What's the reason for choosing Perth?
Yeah, so firstly, I moved over after I graduated uni looking for work. I studied geology originally, so a few of us booked tickets, and Perth was the closest airport. So we flew in here with working holiday visas and hoped for the best, really. And we all got work pretty quickly and ended up staying. Enjoyed the lifestyle. Um, the reason I came back is because of my partner, now wife, Katrina. She's from Perth, so we moved back to Scotland for a few years, and then she wanted to come back and finish her own studies. So that's why I came back. But I was pretty happy to come back as well. I really love the lifestyle here, and the job opportunities are really good for me.
So how would you describe yourself as an athlete now?
Yeah, I was thinking it's funny thinking of myself as an athlete because I've never really considered myself an athlete. So if I was gonna call myself an athlete, I'd say I'm a lifestyle athlete, and that's a a term coined by Tom Oesterdyk. He's a professional triathlete, but he has his own podcast, which I quite enjoyed listening to, and I always liked his approach to the sport. Where, I mean, I'm not comparing myself to him because he's actually a professional, but he always prioritized lifestyle, not just training. And I understand everyone's different. Some people, their livelihood actually depends on it, and they would approach it differently to how I do. But I didn't want training for an event to affect too much the other parts of my life. So I've always prioritized trying to have fun with it and not taking myself too seriously.
Now, you've gone from swimming Rotto through to Celtman. That's quite a spectrum of different conditions that you've competed in.
Yeah.
I'm interested if you just want to give a bit of an overview of that progression through your sport. So you said 10K initially in Scotland. You've come out, you've seen Rotto and said, I'm going to do that. You've done Ironman, and then you did some other ultra trail running events as well. What's kept pulling you towards those longer and harder events?
Yeah, it's a good question. As I've sort of touched on, like for me, it's not so much about the racing. Like I was never that interested in shorter events because for me, it's about testing my own limits and seeing how far I can take my body. And it's amazing once you start training, you realize that you're capable of things that you didn't think you were. So I started off with a 10K swim, which at the time was pushing me to my limit. And my shoulders took a few months to recover from that because I probably hadn't trained enough. But then you're thinking, okay, what's the next thing? You know, I like that feeling of being pushed to the absolute limit. Doesn't matter how fast I'm going or how long it takes, but just feeling that you're completely emptying yourself and testing your body. So yeah, then it went Rottnest, and then once I was training with your squad, then I met a few triathletes and got roped into picking up running again and cycling, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, this triathlon could be good. And I had thought about trying triathlon earlier in my life, and I remember telling my sister I was going to sign up for triathlon, and she laughed at me. And I think anyone who knew me in my early 20s would probably laugh if they knew I was getting up at 5:30 to go swimming. But that's how your life changes over time. And then yeah, I did an Ironman, and then I thought, okay, that was good. That was hard. I'd like to do another one, but when I was in Scotland, we did a hike. I'd heard about this Celtman event. We actually did a hike where they do the run. It was an overnight hike, and I remember walking along the ridge and seeing some guys training for Celtman, running up this mountain and along the ridge, and I thought, wow, that's awesome. Like, I want to do that. And at the time, I was nowhere near fit enough. But fast forward a few years, and I'd done an Ironman. I thought, you know what, maybe I could try that Celtman thing. It's quite hard to get a spot. There's a ballot system, but I was lucky enough to get a spot for the half Celtman, which is hard in itself. So I managed to do that on its first year. And then because I'd done that, I got a spot in the full Celtman for the next year. So that was it. And then I started training on a lot more hills and getting into more trail running.
So if we talk about Celtman, how does that differ from your typical Ironman triathlon type event?
Yeah, so it's part of this series called the X Tri Extreme Triathlon. It started with Norseman in Norway. And then I think Celtman was one of the early races as well. But now there's probably around 10 of them around the world. And they're all in really iconic locations. But generally, the way it differs from a regular Ironman is there's some sort of extreme element. And that's either cold water, lots of hills on the bike, but also trail running instead of road for the marathon. So all the bikes are still on road, but quite often the runs end up being off-road and up mountains. And I think Norseman ends on top of a mountain, and you're basically just hiking the end of it. So it's very different in that it needs more than just cardio fitness. You need skills for running, trail running, and also just the ability to withstand some of these cold water conditions and quite often windy and rainy weather as well.
So if we make comparisons with the water conditions for Celtman against the Rottnest Channel Swim, how did that differ and how did you feel in those different swims?
So obviously the Rottnest is a lot longer and you're not wearing a wetsuit. So people who've swum the English Channel will laugh at me wearing a wetsuit for Celtman because it's only 3.2 kilometers. But for someone who's not trained in cold water swimming, that is enough to do a lot of damage. And it's colder than the English Channel. I think it's usually around 11 to 12 degrees. I can't remember what the English Channel usually is. So yeah, it's a very different challenge. Like people do get cold on Rottnest as well, just because of the time they're in the water, as you'll know. But I think it's 23, 24 degrees usually. So Celtman, yeah, down at that 11, 12 degree mark. You definitely need a wetsuit if you're not trained for it. And most people wear gloves and booties as well, and a neoprene cap. And it's interesting swimming in cold water. If you're not used to it, it can be a real shock when you first get in. And some people probably panic if it's not something you've done before. It can be quite easy to get into a panic, especially once you're a few hundred meters offshore, because you're breathing. When you jump into cold water, you're forced to take that breath and you can start hyperventilating if you don't know how to control that. But then when you're actually swimming, for me, it's my jaw goes numb. So it takes a few minutes to get used to that. And it's quite hard to keep your head in the water because it's so cold. And you just want to lift it up. But after a few minutes, you can get into a routine, and then you just have to try and focus on your technique and just do the same things you always do, but controlling the natural reaction to cold water.
So leading up to that swim, did you do anything different to prepare?
I just made sure I got a few practice swims in cold water. And it's also what you do when you get out, because your face is going to be numb, your hands are going to be frozen. So that makes transition a lot different as well. Trying to pull off a wetsuit when you can't clench your fists is quite hard. But I was tossing up between wearing gloves or not wearing gloves, because swimming with gloves on is very different again, especially if you're used to just swimming in a pool or in warm water. Yeah, keep your hands warm, but for me, I really didn't like the feeling of having the gloves on. So I made the decision not to wear them and just take the hit on having really cold hands. And the year I did it, that was fine because it probably wasn't quite as cold as it could have been. Oh, I've done it twice now. Both years have been pretty good. But then the first hour on the bike got limited use of my fingers. So it's just something you need to be prepared for.
We know normally in a swim, whether the water's cold or very cold, that there's an after drop and the core temperature continues to drop once you exit the water. And in this case, you're jumping on a bike, even though you continue to use the muscles, you've got breeze coming across a wet body. Is there anything else within transition that's considered to try and improve your safety going from the swim to the bike?
Yeah, so again, the years that I've done it, it has been relatively good weather. But I think if it was driving wind and rain, I'd probably do things differently. And I might even get changed into a dry set of clothes. As it was, I was just wearing a tri suit and I put an extra layer on top just on my top half. But yeah, you're right. You can really feel that cold developing even when you start spinning the legs. So it does take a while to get over that. So it's, in that way, it's probably quite good to put a little effort in that first bit in the bike just to get the blood moving and the muscles warmed up a bit. Celtman's quite good for that because the first hour or so is a bit of an uphill drag, so it gets you going.
Swimming across to Rottnest, you can see the bottom for half the swim. So what's it like swimming in a race such as Celtman?
Yeah, the water is actually really nice. It's quite clear, but you still can't see the bottom. So for anyone who doesn't know where Celtman is, it's in Tardin, which is the northwest coast of Scotland, and it's quite it's a sea loch, so it's connected to the ocean, but it's called a sea loch, and it's basically a fjord. So if you know the fjords of Norway, it's basically an inlet with big mountains rising up either side. So it's really deep water. It's a glacial valley. So as soon as you're off the shore, you can't see the bottom, but the water is still quite clear. But the thing that they market alongside the cold water to make it sound more extreme is the plagues of jellyfish. So you get these, they're moon jellyfish. So there's sort of clear ones with the luminous circles in them. And there's absolutely thousands of them. And they come in these big bloom, I think they're called blooms, aren't they? Blooms of jellyfish. So it's kind of like swimming in the Swan River, but nicer. So once you hit one of these blooms, you're just bouncing off jellyfish bouncing off your face, off your hands. So that's quite a strange feeling, again, if you're not used to it. But they don't sting. There's the occasional stinger in there, which are hard to spot. And then there's also the lion's mane jellyfish, I think. So you want to avoid those ones, but they're quite obvious. Otherwise, yeah, it's quite a surreal experience swimming through these massive luminous blue jellyfish. But if you get it right, you can actually use them as paddles. So just grab one and push off it.
You've mentioned that you've done the full course twice, and the second time finishing in the top 10. What changed? How did you improve across the event from 2023 and 25?
I don't know if I improved that much. Like the lead up to the second one was probably worse. I hadn't done a lot of biking, and then I'd come over to Scotland a month early for my brother's stag do and then his wedding. So I had a few weeks of probably not ideal taper, but it worked out okay in the end. And then my bike wheel bust itself the day before the race. So I had to end up with some training wheels, and I don't know how much difference that really makes, but it wasn't ideal. So the bike was definitely a slog, and I felt pretty wrecked after that. I think I was about 20 minutes slower on the bike, but I think it was just the experience of knowing the course. And I had a really good swim. The swimming conditions were amazing. I think we had a slight tide assist as well. So I came out third on the swim. And then it's always good being at the front of the race in these events because you don't get caught up in the pack. Like each rider has a support car, so it can get quite congested, but it's good being out at the front. And then onto the run, I just knew the course really well, and I knew when to hold myself back and when to try and take on nutrition and when I can actually open up a bit and make some time up. So yeah, my run was definitely a lot faster. And I say run, but it's a real mix of running and hiking. About halfway through the run, you have to go up just a sheer mountain side. It's 2 or 3 kilometers at about 25% incline. So like no one's running that. So it's a good chance to just get into a nice hiking routine and try and take on your nutrition. And that's a good chance to recharge. So if you know that, you can use it to your advantage.
What would you do differently to actually race Celtman rather than just survive it?
um, yeah, I'm probably doing myself a bit of a disservice because I did train. I did do a lot of training, but I would do more on the bike for sure. The bike's the one thing that I never do enough of because it just is so time consuming. And I really like swimming and I quite like running now as well, especially trail running. Whereas biking's always a bit of a slog, just the hours and hours that you need to do. And Celtman is a biker's course, like it's a 200k bike, so it's slightly longer than a Ironman, and it is rolling hills, so it's nothing crazy in terms of elevation, but there's a lot of crosswinds and headwinds and just short, sharp up and down. So if you're a strong rider, you'll do well there.
We talked about wetsuits and the trade-offs, whether you wore gloves or not. Did you continue with that on that second swim, that second race?
Yeah, I pretty much did it exactly the same actually. And I didn't wear booties either. I don't really like wearing booties. I like having my feet free. And you don't really need to feel your feet when you're cycling as long as you have it back by the time you're running. The only issue with that is sometimes it's quite tricky stepping over the rocks and things, getting in and getting out of the water. So booties would be nice in that. But yeah, I always thought the trade off was worth it to be able to feel the water.
When you start to swim in those colder conditions, does the effort feel different?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's the combination of the cold water shock and the start of an event. So yeah, my heart rate was probably peaking in the first 20 minutes of the swim because you're straight into this cold water, your body's in shock, and also you tend to get a bit carried away at the start of a swim as well. So you do feel like the effort level is high. And I remember thinking that about halfway through the swim, like, oh, I just need to slow this down a bit because there's two really fast guys and I was trying to hold their toes, but I thought, oh, it's better just to try and relax a bit here and just get into a better routine. Whereas at Ironman, because it's that rolling start, I've never felt like I went out too hard. I just get into a routine from the start. And then Rottnest kind of the same. Like, it's such a long event. You don't want to go too hard too early. Just trying to control the effort.
So, how would you do things differently if you were to race it again?
Yeah, I'd get better at navigating. I don't think I'd do too much different on the swim, to be honest. I think my level of training was appropriate. Like, I don't think I would have benefited from swimming anymore. I was kind of happy with my warmth level. But yeah, it's a point to point course and you have to go around two islands. And I went way too far north on the second island. So probably added on some distance there. So yeah, just getting better at sighting. That's something I need to do. You're meant to look up and there's a white house on the peninsula and you're meant to aim for that. But I think I had the wrong white house because I ended up way too far north.
You mentioned earlier that you didn't want this sport to take over, that it's a lifestyle that you've chosen. So, getting that balance between training and life is really important. I'm interested, how do you actually consider the balance between your work, your family, and your training?
Yeah, it's always a tricky one, isn't it? And there's definitely been times where I think the balance was probably too far towards training and I was missing out on spending quality time with my partner and friends. But at the same time, you meet a lot of people through the sport, so training ends up being your social life, which is nice in its own way. But yeah, I never want to feel like I'm missing something because I have to train the next day. I'd rather see my friends or see my family and maybe do a shorter session the next day or start a bit later, whatever it might be. As long as you keep that consistency in training, I think it's fine to miss the odd session. Like I would try and prioritize lifestyle and maintaining connections than making sure my training peaks was all green.
And has becoming a parent changed your approach?
Yeah, definitely. We're still early days, so he's 5 months now, and yeah, anyone who's had kids will know that's just the start of it. Really, there's not really a routine yet, and we're still learning and getting used to it. So I didn't really know what to expect. My training over the past 5 months has just been to maintain fitness, really, and I'm not aiming for any events right now. Just maintain fitness and get out of the house, which is good for your head. But yeah, it's not so much that you can't train, but it's like how much do you want to be present with the kid, and how much support do you want to give your partner? So it's just finding that balance at the moment. But before you know it, they'll be in daycare and in school. So I want to make sure I spend as much time with them as I can during this period. And as of today, I'm on parental leave for 6 weeks. So that's going to be good. And I'll get more time with him and also more time training, hopefully.
You've done a couple of Rotto swims. I'm interested if you could maybe share your first experiences with your most recent one.
Yeah, so the first one I did was in 2020. And by that point, I'd done 3 10K swims. So I was relatively comfortable with long distance swimming. But I knew anything beyond 15K was going to be unknown territory, really. And then you throw in the conditions on the day. It was actually not a bad day in 2020. It was quite a weird crosswind. There was a bit of side chop, but it wasn't like a big sea breeze or anything. So I probably didn't nail my nutrition back then. I didn't know a lot about long events at that point. And the last 4K were really tough. But I got through it and had a good support crew. The second one, so last year I had to pull out halfway. So it's a bit different. I was doing it as a tandem solo with James, who you know. And despite what James might tell you, he's a better swimmer than me. Definitely a better swimmer than me. But he was struggling to find a boat, so we decided to do a tandem. And he knew that he was probably going to have to slow down at some point to swim with me. So that adds, even if you're good mates and you've made a plan, like it does add complexity, because anytime you slow down or stop, you know that you're holding the other person up. Yeah, so even if you've made a plan, on the day it can be different, and one of you might be feeling good, one of you might be feeling worse. And every time you stop, slow down, or want to take a feed, you know that you're holding the other person up, and that adds its own sort of internal pressure. Even if they are saying it's fine, you don't want to be responsible for them slowing down or getting cold or whatever it might be. So there's a few things at play that day, but I made the decision at about 10K to jump out and make sure that James got across safely, which he did. So that was good. And part of that was probably me knowing that I'd done it before and knowing that I didn't need to prove anything. And I had a few other issues going on at the time in my body. So yeah, I thought it was best just to jump out, which is a shame because I was actually swimming quite well. We'd done the first 10K in good time, but it was a different sort of challenge. I don't like DNFing. I think it was probably the first one I've done. But when it's not like a running event or a triathlon event where you can stop and walk or sit at the side of the road for a minute if you need to, with swimming, you're always treading water. You can't rest. And especially if you're doing a tandem, because the other person has to stop as well. So it's tricky. There's a lot of moving parts.
So, how did that make you feel?
I was pretty gutted to start with, but more so because of all the effort that goes into organizing an event like that, to get your crew sorted, to support boat, the paddlers, and you feel like you've let them down. And I actually remember thinking that in my first crossing. Anytime I started thinking, oh, this is hard, like I don't know if I can do it, I would just think about my support crew and think, look, you've got all these people together, you've organized the boat, the paddlers, everyone's there for you. Don't mess this up. It's going to be hard to get this opportunity again. So just finish it. And that got me through the last few K. But yeah, on this occasion, like I definitely felt disappointed in myself, but I was also happy to support James through that last half and get him across the line. And then on reflection, after a few days, like it's not a big deal. Like life goes on, and it's not made any difference to my livelihood. It's just a bit of an annoyance that I didn't finish it. But yeah, swimming's hard. Long distance swimming, it is hard.
So, just a couple of quick ones. Your favourite swim set and why?
Short one, 25s or 50s. No, I think golf is really good. I know everyone probably says that, but it's just a really good challenge of trying to maintain speed, but also the endurance of 2100s. Even though I hate it at the time, like it is a really good set, and it is a good tester of where your fitness is at. And I think it's also a good race simulation. You know, trying to maintain that threshold pace is really good.
Are you a singer or a counter?
In the pool. Yeah, I've never really thought about that. I do have songs in my head quite often. So I'm probably a singer because I quite often lose count as well. So yeah, singer.
Your favourite event?
Celtman.
Best decision you made mid swim?
Having a Red Bull at 18 kilometers on the way to Rottnest.
The worst conditions you've swum in?
Bosso last year was pretty bad. The jetty swim, that's probably the worst I've been in, and it's not even that bad. I've been quite lucky.
Now, is there any advice that you would give to someone who's stepping up from, say, swimming in the pool to swimming something like Rotto, or chasing the idea of swimming an Ironman or Celtman?
So with swimming specifically, with open water swimming, it's just getting comfortable for me. I came from a pool swimming background and started swimming open water when I was late 20s. So it's just getting out there and being comfortable in the water, because there's lots of unknowns, darkness and fish and large fish, jellyfish, currents, waves. Just spending time out there and trying to accept those unknowns and become comfortable with them. And then you can really enjoy yourself. And yeah, if I was going to do it all over again, I would put way more effort into thinking about nutrition early in the piece. And I know you've had Gabby on the podcast, and she's got some really good tips on that. But from what I've experienced, a lot of people, age groupers at least, when the distance gets to Ironman and Rottnest, it's nutrition that becomes the limiting factor, not fitness. You can get your fitness to the right level relatively easily, but can you train your body to burn energy at the required rate for 10 hours? It's very hard to get used to. It's very hard to train for as well without doing it. So yeah, trying to think about nutrition, because it is the fourth discipline or the second discipline for swimming. And yeah, just enjoy it. Like, try not to get too caught up, and don't take it too seriously unless you're a professional.
I think that's a really awesome place to finish. Thank you so much for taking time to catch up. I appreciate the inconsistencies that parenthood, the lack of routine can bring. So to take the time out to have a chat today, I really appreciate it.
No worries, Grant. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully some of that will be interesting for people. I'll be back at training, I promise.
Thanks for listening to the Science and Art of Open Water Swimming. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might find it useful. Whether that's a training partner, a swimmer, or someone thinking about stepping into open water for the first time. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we'll share some more from this episode and other conversations. I'll include links in the show notes to Celtman and a couple of the resources we mentioned today if you'd like to explore further. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the water.